Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K. Laidlaw. Wendy has spent the last 2 years helping women with various stages of endometriosis to heal naturally after putting her condition into remission. After her own healing success from stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis, she's inspired to heal others, and her goal is to help some of the 175 million women know that there is another way other than painkillers, drugs, or surgery. This is the place to be for real talk with real people for real results, so you can learn how to heal your endometriosis naturally. Please note that the opinions expressed in this program may represent options, but are not a substitute for proper medical care. Before starting any new healthcare program, we recommend you consult with a health professional.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast with me, Wendy K. Laidlaw, and Heal Endometriosis Naturally. The title of this podcast today is called The Eight-Legged Octopus. All will be revealed as we go through. But I start by talking about anxiety. Anxiety used to follow me around like a choker around my neck, sucking the life from me. It was like a black, heavy cloud waiting to drench me at any moment. Felt like there was no control. No warning, no awareness, just this feeling of dread when its tentacles touched a part of me. Hence why I refer to it as the eight-legged octopus. It would come at me from all different angles. I would only then know it was coming and feel powerless, sucked down into the dark pit of despair with no way out, like being dropped down a narrow yet bottomless water well of darkness and overwhelm. That was then, and I'm pleased to say that this is now. Back then, it controlled me. Now, I control it. I understand it before it grows. You see, anxiety should be viewed as a little child that needs more information. You might see young children whose little brains can only cope with one piece of information at a time. Try and get a 3 or 4-year-old to do multiple things with multiple stimulation, and they become overloaded and overwhelmed and agitated. Stimulation from many angles at different times can also cause anxiety. I remember when I fell pregnant with my daughter, who was the daughter, of course, doctor said I would never have, but did, and being so aware that whilst she was growing in my womb, her ears were developing too. I had read this fantastic book during her pregnancy called The Hot House Kids, and it was about brain development in the womb, and it inspired me. You see, I came from a very toxic family and had an abusive upbringing, so I realized I would have to work very hard to ensure that I did not subconsciously repeat any of the family patterns. I had to educate myself as much as I could in order to break the narcissistic ancestry forever. I had witnessed my grandmother on my father's side silently during family gatherings from a young age. She was a deeply empathetic woman who had looked after me when I was born and I was little. My mother was, because of her endometriosis, was in and out of hospital all the time. Her history was so sad. As I was also an empathetic person from birth, I felt her pain like it was my own. You see, my grandmother was sent to the original St. Trinian's boarding school at the tender age of 5 years old. Her parents, my great-grandparents, were living in India at the time. Can you imagine what that must have been like at the young age of 5 to be left in an old and cold, unloving environment of the British colonial schooling? Throughout history, it is well known how the austere, heartless, and authoritarian these institutions were, and it has psychologically scarred many a generation thereafter. At that time, it was deemed acceptable to treat children poorly. Little did anyone think that these poor, vulnerable children would grow up to be adults. Adults who would grow up and be so emotionally scarred, they would subconsciously, or consciously in some cases with toxic people, repeat the abuse on the generations who would follow. How can you tell if someone deserves your compassion and/or empathy? When you ask a person to stop hurting you and they stop, apologize, and then never repeat it again, that's a good sign of a normal, nice person. However, a toxic person makes all the right noises, yet before long has repeated the toxic behavior, claiming they didn't know what they were doing. A classic sign of gaslighting and emotional abuse, and a toxic individual who feels pleasure from your pain. But anyway, back to my grandmother. She would say how she was brought up to be seen and not heard from a young age, told to sit silently, to have been left on the school steps and abandoned, as she called it, sadly set up patterns of anxiety that she struggled with for decades. And that anxiety grew into depression. And she would sandwich her sad and upset feelings with layers of beliefs about herself that didn't help either. My granny believed she was worthless. She believed she was unlovable and that there was something wrong with her. These were entrenched deep within her and reinforced by the harshness of 12 years of Victorian-styled schooling, the lack of safe cuddles and love from parents who were thousands of miles away by boat, opened up holes and great chasms in her heart that sadly would never be filled. And there was no Skype or email in those days. And if that was not bad enough, and because of her emotionally poor start in life, she would grow up and attract a man who would treat her poorly, subconsciously marrying her father and trying to put right the wrongs of yesteryear. This reinforced her burgeoning poor self-beliefs to the shocking point that she would accept my grandfather taking his mistress on their honeymoon. Yes, you heard me right. His mistress on their honeymoon. My darling granny would end up on her wedding night alone and abandoned, and subsequently would end up very ill physically and mentally for the rest of her life. She would come to have phantom pregnancies and many suicide attempts. At the end of her life, she was desperate to die and to be released from pain. It is only when I had a bad bout of depression after the birth of my daughter that she would share these vulnerable feelings with me. And she said the anxiety was the worst. It had no boundaries, no clear start, and no clear end. It would sneak up on her and grab at her chest and heart, swallowing her up to the point of despair. Of course, the visits to the doctors would result in endless prescriptions of antidepressants, which caused her major side effects. And we know much more about feelings nowadays than was known back then. Maybe if her doctor had been compassionate and taken the time to gently explore more about her or her life, then medications wouldn't be needed at all. Perhaps if the medical field were educated about how feeling states have an origin, then treatment of humans would change for the better. There are an amazing amount of great people trying to help those in distress. And anxiety is an emotion that does not need to be deadened with drugs. It needs to be heard. It needs to be reassured. It needs more information. The feeling of anxiety is a messenger. It's telling you something is not quite right. When I look back on those dark days, I had no knowledge of how to make sense of the feelings, only that I wanted to escape them, especially anxiety. I became a workaholic to distract myself from those feelings. With others, it's excessive shopping or smoking or alcohol or chocolate. Something, anything to dull the pain. The good news is, however, is that my water well got a cement base a few years ago. It is not an endless dark hole anymore. And I chopped off the legs of the 8-legged octopus too. The octopus legs that would have previously snuck up on me, wrapped around my ankles and slowly dragged me down the water well as I grappled and fervently tried to hang on for dear life. Anxiety and depression almost broke me. Not only because of the powerlessness I felt, but the strongest desire to control those feelings and people and places and things around me that I couldn't control. So what do you do when anxiety strikes? Move ink across the paper. Write down the feelings onto the page of your journal. It helps to unearth the old conditioning and background operating system of indoctrinated beliefs, much like the background systems of an Apple Mac or Microsoft computer. You learn to see and hear them for what they are, just feelings. And then the emotions attached to them will lessen. I promise you this. Obviously, it's not an overnight process, but it works. It works and is a gentle, safe, loving start to hear what little you needs. Hear what has been triggered. Learn of the information of other parts you need to feel better. It may be, like my darling grandmother, that you were made to feel invisible, worthless, and less than growing up. But you're not. You are lovable. And yes, I'm talking to you. You are visible. And you are worth it. And yes, I'm talking to you. because I see and know that there is a real light inside of you. And for you to really see your light and shake off the shackles of the past, you must start the processing via journaling. It is not the easiest protocol to start with, but it becomes your best friend that you've ever had. You become all that you need to yourself. You become your best friend in the whole wide world. You will be able in time to listen to the small voice and safely start to give it some light. You will catch you when you fall. Be able to hear what it needs, what you need to finally make peace with the anxiety within you. Many women with endometriosis have suffered terribly, not only physically but emotionally. Many have endured the most awful abuse, not only from the medical field that was supposed to help them, but from family that was supposed to protect them and love them. When you grow up with no family or a dysfunctional family, it leaves a hole in your heart where anxiety and depression reside. But fear not. You are so much stronger than you know. You have the power to listen to your anxiety, to reassure it, and give it what it needs to disperse and disappear. It needs journaling. It needs a loving ear and time. It needs you and the slaying of the 8-legged octopus with self-love. When you're ready to take action, remember to reach out, and you can start with the 5 top quick start tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com, or reach out and learn how you can either become a certified practitioner or work with me to help heal your endometriosis naturally. Until then, keep you number one.
Thanks for listening to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K. Laidlaw, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us. If you're interested in learning more, you can download your top 5 jumpstart tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com and jump on the VIP email list. Remember to keep you number one. The world needs a healthy you.